Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibition of the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the rights of the people to peacefully assemble, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. The First Amendment isn't just the first for no reason. It's the big one. The framers basically shoved the entire idea of liberty into 45 words. Religion, speech, press, assembly, and petition. 5 nuclear-level freedoms in one neat little package. And this just wasn't theory. These guys had lived through censorship crackdowns and a king who thought disagreeing with them was a crime. The First Amendment wasn't about sounding good. It was about survival. Welcome to our republic.
When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political band,
sailors and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force.
Well, I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the founding fathers. Not
those 3 hallowed words reverently dictate what you ought to be, what you can be, what you will be.
We pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor.
Welcome to our republic. This one is going to be a little long today. We are going to be covering a lot of information, and I'm actually going to give you some examples from today. Now, if you're watching this from 20 years ago, 20 years later or whatever, not 20 years ago, that'd be time travel, whatever. If you're watching this, years down the road, these are still going to be topics people talk about. So let's talk about the First Amendment. The first part we're going to cover is religion, free exercise, and no establishment. Religion comes first, and it wasn't an accident. The colonists had seen the state churches in action, mandatory taxes to support the clergy, laws banning certain denominations, prison sentences if you skipped the approved church, right? Virginia was ground zero for this fight. Before the Revolution, Baptists were jailed for preaching without state licenses. Go Baptists. Patrick Henry pushed a plan to keep the state churches funded by taxes. James Madison and others fought back, arguing in his Memorial of Remonstrance, that word is Memorial and Remonstrance, that faith had to be voluntary, not forced. The result? Jefferson's Virginia Statute for Religious Freedoms, a direct ancestor of the First Amendment. So the Constitution laid down 2 principles: no establishment, right, which is no official Church of America, no king-approved religion, right, and free exercise. Believe and worship as you choose, or don't worship at all. And this is revolutionary. In a world where most nations still had official religions, America said faith would be free. So next up, we got speech, right? Okay. This one hits hard because the founders knew what it was like to be silenced. I was trying not to go on a tirade about the freedom of speech currently happening, right now. But in England, criticizing the king was seditious libel. Truth didn't matter. If your words embarrassed the crown, you were guilty. The First Amendment threw that out. Americans could now speak against their leaders, their laws, and the Constitution itself. But here's the key. Free speech protects unpopular speech. It's easy to defend words you agree with. The real test is when someone says something you hate. That's why civil rights activists demanded a change in the 1960s, why anti-war protesters could shout in the 1970s, and why Americans today can argue about everything under the sun without fear of government chains. Yeah, it's messy, it's loud, and some people get real butthurt about it, but it's freedom. And then we got freedom of press. Free press goes hand in hand with speech, but it's even sharper. It turns your opinion into ink on paper, right? Or in today, I don't know if anybody listens to the radio, but, TV, YouTube, Rumble, podcasts, social media, TikTok, whatever, okay, right? It blasts it out there for everyone to see, right? And one of the biggest early tests is the John Peter Zenger trial in 1735, right? Decades before independence. Okay. Zenger was a New York printer accused of libel for publishing articles criticizing the royal governor. And the jury acquitted him, setting the precedent that truth was a defense and that newspapers could challenge governmental power. By the Revolution, pamphlets and papers were the lifeblood of liberty, right? Like think of Thomas Paine's Common Sense, 500,000 copies in a country of 2 million. Without a free press, there might not have ever been a revolution, in my opinion, right? Or even a constitution because of the Federalist Papers, right? They printed all that stuff to help support why the Constitution needed to be printed. And assembly, we're on to assembly. Speech is powerful, but when you put people together, it becomes more of a movement, right? Not an unstoppable movement. People say it's an unstoppable movement. Oh, pipe down. Assembly means you have the right to gather, march, protest, and demand change, as long as it's peaceful. The Summer of Love was not peaceful. The BLM riots were not peaceful. Those were illegal. These rights were tested early, right? In the 1760s and the 1770s, colonists gathered in town meetings, protest rallies, Sons of Liberty gatherings to oppose British taxes and tyranny. Without assembly, there would have been no Boston Tea Party, no committees of correspondence, and no spark for the revolution, right? Later, women fighting for a vote organized parades, conventions, and mass rallies in the 1884 Seneca Falls Convention. Abolitionists packed the halls and churches, demanding an end to slavery. Workers in the 1800s held strikes and marches to push for safer conditions and fair pay. It's the muscle of assembly, right? One voice turns into a chorus, and a chorus, people are going to listen. You're louder. You're going to hear it, right? And without it, you're just an isolated complainer. With it, you're a people. Now, petition. It doesn't get that much attention, to be honest, but it's one of the most radical freedoms. In the 18th century, telling the king he was wrong could cost you your head. The Declaration of Independence itself was a giant petition. It is a list of grievances saying, hey, King George, we tried talking to you, you ignored us, and now we're out. The First Amendment made that permanent. Americans can always bring grievances to their government, write letters, collect signatures, file lawsuits, demand hearings. Petition is a formal way for people to keep pressure on leaders without fear of retribution. It's not glamorous, but it's the bedrock of accountability. So now let's talk about some current topics under this amendment. Why Jimmy Kimmel's firing, or any other host's firing, isn't a First Amendment issue. Some people are probably going to turn this off at this point, but I challenge you to listen to this. Let's clear this up, right? I want to clear it up before some lefty or someone says free speech, right? And, throws a pocket constitution at their phone or throws their phone across the room or whatever, right? Jimmy Kimmel getting fired or any other host getting canned is not a First Amendment issue. The First Amendment says the government cannot censor you. It doesn't say Disney has to keep cutting your paycheck if you're tanking their brand, right? Some people are saying there was pressure from the FCC, right? But there are still guidelines that you have to follow under the FCC. And flat out dishonesty is one of them. But Uncle Sam can't arrest you for a bad joke, but your boss sure as hell can fire you if that joke makes sponsors run for the hills. That's not tyranny. That is basically Tuesday in a free market. And here's the real kicker, right? That late night TV isn't what it used to be. Johnny Carson used to pull in tens of millions of viewers a night. Today, Kimmy's lucky if he breaks a couple million. That's a drop of 70 to 80% compared to the golden era. Fewer eyeballs means fewer advertisers, right? And they start packing their bags. And when the ad money goes away, the network has two choices: keep bleeding cash, or cut the host. So when a network pulls the plug, it is not freedom of speech being crushed. It's just math. He opened his mouth, said something that caused sponsors to pull back, viewers to leave. And there you go. Too few viewers, too little money. Goodbye late night paycheck. Goodbye Jimmy Kimmel. I think it was a mistake they brought him back. He's already lost 64% of the viewers that he had before. Why are you keeping him? But regardless, the Constitution protects you from the government. The market protects itself from bad ratings. Big difference. Okay? The First Amendment also protects offensive speech. Here's the deal. In America, hate speech, which isn't real, is still free speech. I know it makes some people just clutch their pearls, but again, stick with me. The First Amendment does not say Congress shall make no law unless someone gets offended. No, that's France and England and Germany and all those hippy-dippy countries that wouldn't exist if we didn't help them in World War II. The law says no law, period. The whole point is to protect speech that's ugly, unpopular, straight up offensive, because the stuff everyone agrees with doesn't need protection, right? It just isn't, again, it isn't theory. The Supreme Court has ruled on this over and over and over again, and I'm sorry that if these examples piss you off, get over it. A KKK rally spewing garbage is protected. Brandenburg versus Ohio in 1969. Some lunatics holding up disgusting signs at a soldier's funeral, protected. Snyder versus Phelps in 2011. But why? Because the second you give the government power to decide what counts as hate, you've basically handed them the censorship button. And this was so prevalent during the Biden administration. We know it. Conservatives were censored in the thousands across platforms. YouTube is still doing it today. I'm sorry, I don't care if you agree with me. This episode could probably be censored or whatever, and I'll probably get in trouble, but who cares? They are still doing it. They said we're going to bring back conservatives, and they still haven't done it. There are people who still have not come back. Alex Jones was silenced. I'm not a big fan of Alex Jones. He's a little bit loony for me. I like kind of whatever. Doesn't matter. They still haven't brought him back because they are censoring people. Right? And I understand some people are like, oh, it's private business and all this kind of stuff, but there's evidence they were pressured by the government. I'm not going to get into that one. I'm just going to get angry, and you don't want to hear me rant anymore. Anyway. Whoever is in power, right? If we give the censorship button to the government, whoever is in power would use it against the speech they don't like. And I don't care if you're a Republican, a Democrat, a liberal, a libertarian, whatever, you should be able to say what you want, even if it offends somebody else. Okay? Today, right? It's banning racism, right? They're trying to do all this stuff. Racism is still, as long as it's not inciting violence or harm, it's still free speech. Do I condone it? No, right? So let's don't confuse this, right? The First Amendment only stops the government. If you run your mouth at work, your boss can fire you, right? That's not a violation. That's capitalism handing you consequences, right? You can say what you want. I tell my kids this all the time. You can say what you want, but there are consequences for what you say, right? But the thing is that Uncle Sam cannot kick down your door and arrest you for being offensive. That only happens in England. So yeah, hate speech is disgusting. It's gross. But protecting it is the cost of keeping the government out of businesses and out of the business that decides what you're allowed to say. And that is a price worth paying. Okay, I'm done with speech. We're going to go into religion and why Sharia law is contradictory to the First Amendment and has no place in America. Whether we as Americans like it or not, Islam is a personal religion. And that's not the issue. right? The First Amendment clearly says that Congress shall make no law prohibiting the free exercise of religion. Muslims in America have the exact same right to pray, worship, fast, and live their faith as anyone else. However, Sharia law is an Islamic legal system, a direct contradiction to the Constitution and the First Amendment. That's where it gets tricky, because people will be like, oh, well, Islam doesn't exist without Sharia law. See, that's where we get goes a little bit deeper, right? I'm going to break down 4 things for you with examples of punishment in Sharia law. Free speech versus blasphemy laws. The First Amendment protects speech, even offensive, critical, or unpopular speech. Under Sharia law, blasphemy or criticizing Islam can be punishable offenses. That directly violates the First Amendment guarantee that you can speak freely without the fear of punishment by the law. Now, the punishment under Sharia law for this is the death penalty, prison, flogging, or fines for insulting Muhammad, who's a pedophile, the Quran, or Islamic teachings. Examples: in Pakistan, blasphemy laws allow for the death penalty. Hundreds have been sentenced, some executed, others lynched by mobs. In Saudi Arabia, blasphemous speech can get you lashes, prison, or executions. Even insulting someone online can get you jailed. Move on to number 2, freedom of religion versus apostasy. The First Amendment guarantees the right to choose your religion or leave it with no governmental interference. Under Sharia law, leaving Islam, apostasy, is a punishable crime. That is completely contradictory to the religious liberty as guaranteed in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Punishment under Sharia law is death penalty or imprisonment for leaving Islam, apostasy, loss of property, annulment of marriage, loss of custodial rights. Here's some examples. In Afghanistan and Iran, apostasy is punishable by death. Converts to Christianity, for example, are often executed or forced to flee. This is a reality. I've met people who've had to flee the Middle East because they were going to be executed. Families sometimes kill apostates themselves in so-called honor killings. So let's go to number 3, equal protection versus religious supremacy. The Constitution applies equally to everyone, no matter your faith, gender, or background. Under Sharia law, Muslims are treated differently than non-Muslims, and men have different rights than women. It's incompatible with the American Constitution. It has no place in our country. Punishment under Sharia law for this is non-Muslims historically had to pay a tax and could not hold equal legal status. This is happening in Dearborn, Michigan, where Americans are being forced to actually pay a tax because they're not Muslims. Women's testimony in court is often half that of a man's, right? Inheritance laws given to daughters, half of their son shares. Examples: in Sharia law courts in places like Saudi Arabia, a Christian or a Jew's testimony can be dismissed against the Muslims. Inheritance laws are still applied. Women legally get less than men, and non-Muslims are banned from holding certain offices or entering holy cities. We don't do that here, although I actually think we should. Number 4, civil authority versus religious authority. The Constitution establishes that lawmaking comes from the people's representatives and that the Constitution itself is the supreme law of the land. Sharia law claims divine supremacy that does not submit to man-made constitutions. That makes it legally impossible to coexist in our system. Why it's not illegal in this country now is mind-blowing to me. Punishments under Sharia law for this: any law that contradicts Sharia law is considered invalid. So they automatically see our Bill of Rights and think it's not valid. So why follow the law? Because they don't believe it should be. Loyal to secular constitution can be viewed as disobedience to God. Enforcing man-made law over Sharia itself can be a punishable act. In Iran, here's some examples. Clerics can overrule parliament and strike down laws if they contradict Sharia. The Taliban controlled Afghanistan. Courts forced Sharia punishments, stoning, amputations, executions, above any civil code. Even in hybrid systems like Pakistan, judges can strike down laws for not being Islamic enough. Now, I know a lot of you, this guy's Islamophobe. No, I'm not scared of people that believe in Islam. But I do call BS on a law system that is antithetical to our Constitution and our American value systems and our Bill of Rights. It has no place here. You come to America, you assimilate to our laws and our culture. That's it. If not, bye-bye. The First Amendment is the backbone of American history. It's not just a suggestion, it's a shield. Forged from the colonists' experience with tyranny. Religion, no king, no state, no forced faith. Speech, say what you believe, even if it's unpopular. Hate speech isn't a real thing. Press, publish the truth. Expose corruption. Media, are you listening? Assembly, gather together, turn voices into movements of people peacefully. BLM riots were not a peaceful assembly. Petition and demand change. Right wrongs and hold leaders accountable. It's messy, loud, and sometimes offensive, but that's the point. Without it, you don't get the Bill of Rights. You get a people that are silenced by their government. I thank you for listening. Remember, history is not boring, especially when 45 words gave ordinary people the power to worship freely, speak boldly, print truth to power, march in the streets, and tell their leaders they're frickin' wrong. All without the fear of tyrants' chains. Thanks for listening.